Hey guys, welcome to Mom Again, the show where my best friend and I talk about our attempt to navigate life as moms, neurodivergent disasters, and generally exhausted human beings just trying to keep our shit together.
So, why this podcast? Well, we realized that there are so many of us out here moms, caregivers, disabled folk, neurodivergent people who are just out here trying to make it, and no one really gives us a handbook for how to survive when society wasn't exactly built with us in mind. So, we figured, why not talk about it? Why not share our stories, our struggles, our wins, our absolute disasters? Why not make it a fucking party?
This is a space where we can be real, we can be messy, and most importantly, know that we're not alone in this. So grab a drink, find a comfy spot, and get ready to laugh, cry, and maybe even learn something weirdly fascinating along the way.
All right, let's fucking do this.
You're a wizard, Jess.
I'm a what?
No, for real. Like, you're on trial for being a witch right now. So I'm gonna need you to grab your things and come with me. We're gonna hang you.
Fun.
Not in a kinky way either. I know, like, it's silly or whatever, but today we're gonna talk about the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials happened between 1692 and 1693. And if you're thinking, oh, that weird thing where everyone lost their minds, no one like lost their minds. This was fully intentional behavior inside of a broken system, which is honestly worse and unfortunately very relatable to today's current political climate. Would you agree?
I do. I do.
We should talk about it.
Yeah, of course we should.
I guess kind of to kick things off, just talking about Salem itself. Salem, Massachusetts was like a powder keg. The village wasn't just religious, it was fucking unstable. This community had at this time just survived smallpox outbreaks. They lived through brutal frontier violence during King William's War. They absorbed refugees who had watched their families die. There was ongoing land disputes and inheritance battles, constant fear that God was punishing them because that was like the go-to thing at this time when just natural bad things would happen. Puritans believed that suffering meant sin. So if bad things are happening, someone was guilty. And when societies are under pressure, they don't typically tend to immediately look at leadership. They look sideways. Um,
Right.
so we, in this way, some of the modern crises that we've seen from the pandemic to economic crisis and political chaos, we see how even today in society, we're still trying to figure out who to blame. And that doesn't necessarily fix the system, right?
Right.
So women had responsibility, not authority. The women in Salem carried enormous responsibility with absolutely no authority. They raised the children, they managed the food, they tended to the sick, and they maintained moral order in the home. But legally, they were invisible. So, under coverture, a married woman couldn't own property independently. They couldn't sign any contracts, they couldn't control wages, and she couldn't even like represent herself in any form, especially legally. So she was at this time like a woman was expected to uphold society without being allowed to even shape it.
Right.
So I feel like this specifically is a perfect place to kind of connect how today women are still expected to emotionally manage families and workplaces and communities without decision making power.
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous. The amount of responsibilities that fall onto women and the expectations that fall onto women is outrageous. You know, you're expected to work like you don't have a kid. You're expected to raise your kid like you don't have a job. You have to maintain your job. Most of the time, husbands come home and they sit down and relax and they do nothing. But then you still have to cook and clean and you still have to make sure that anything else that has to get taken care of is done before you can sit down and relax.
Yeah, and God forbid there be a female president.
Right. Nobody's ready for that.
And I think that kind of still holds so much understanding of where we're at as a society because we've never had a woman in charge. We barely have. You know, we have like congressional leaders, we have women in politics now. That's like pretty new. Especially like women of color too.
Right.
I feel like all of these things, you know, they're new and they're still you're going to see those are going to be your most targeted of most. I talk about AOC a lot, and AOC had this, maybe you are aware of like the quote that she had when she was being harassed by another political person, where she talks about how, like, she was not raised to accept abuse from men,
Mhm.
right? She is going to fucking stand up. And this is an adaptive thing. We've adapted to be this way.
We have.
So we're not necessarily given that authority or that power. We've had to kind of fucking take it for ourselves
We
and
have.
be demonized for it, essentially.
Yeah. That's kind of one of the things that I love about AOC is just that she has kind of stood up and made people uncomfortable, like males and all of that, because she does not accept the abuse. She does not accept the name calling and the pettiness and things like that. They're claiming, she's a woman, she can do multiple things, she can multitask. I mean, hell, we were raised to do this in life, basically. So that's one of the things that I definitely love about her.
Yeah. As we continue to move on, we talk about kind of some of the people who were initially targeted. It goes without saying that obviously women didn't hold power. Feminism, in my opinion, and I'm not even gonna say in my opinion, in general, it should be intersectional. We should acknowledge that there are going to be certain women, women in poverty, gender women, women of color specifically, they're going to feel the effects of the patriarchy a lot harder than like the typical white woman. And that's just keeping it intersectional. We're all suffering with this society that wasn't built for us, but then even harder, women of color, trans women, women in poverty, like they're feeling this a lot harder, and they're gonna be the ones we see get targeted, and that's exactly what
Oh,
happens
yeah.
next. In January of 1962, there were 2 girls, Betty Paris and Abigail Williams, and they began having violent fits. They were screaming, convulsing. They claimed there were invisible forces that were attacking them. Doctors couldn't explain it. And this is, again, this is the 1600s. Um, so instead of saying, "We don't know," what do you think they said?
Right.
Witchcraft. Because historically, ignorance plus authority is such a dangerous combo. Those girls would go on to accuse 3 women. So there was Sarah Good, who was an unhoused pregnant person. There was Sarah Osborne, who was an elderly woman who stayed to herself. She was very much like introverted, didn't go out into the community very much. And then there was Tituba, and she was an enslaved woman. If you notice the theme here, they were not the most powerful women. These were women that no one would miss, but could essentially be, the victim of
Right.
blame. At this time, eh, and again, we see this now, the value of a confession, the value of saying, okay, fine, you're right. Tituba confessed to witchcraft, and she wasn't guilty, but because she knew at this time confession could potentially mean survival, she talked about that she would be flying using witchcraft, and she had animal familiars, and she mentioned a lot of those like hot words, like the devil's book, essentially.
Right.
So she pretty much just told the court what they wanted to hear, and this is, like, no shade either. She was fighting for her life at this time.
Yeah.
And I think the key point in all of this is she did live. I don't feel like at this time confession was about truth, it was about confirming the system. And I feel like this is kind of where we need to pause and acknowledge something super uncomfortable. This system rewards compliance. The
Yes.
system rewards self-blame, and the system rewards performance of guilt, and it punishes silence, denial, and science and resistant, which is extremely relatable.
Right.
We could say um, the Me Too movement was a
Yeah.
huge indicator of how we still see this in this day. It's so much easier to, we talk to all the time. You hear specifically men, but I've also hear women say, well, if you were sexually assaulted, then why didn't you just say something?
Right. I hate that.
Like, if I say something, what is that going to look like for me? If I confess that that this has happened to me, especially I have been a victim of being sexually assaulted on multiple accounts. There was a situation where, I did say fuck it and I took it and it went well in my favor, but that doesn't, that's typically not going to happen. It was my boss at the time and he was a very rich man, very powerful man, and he was sexually harassing me. And my coworker saw it happen. I couldn't fucking do it anymore. And I reported him.
Right.
And I'll never forget him calling me into the office and me sitting down. And I didn't really know at the time what was going on, but he looked at me and he told me, I know that you are the one who reported me. I know you're why I'm getting investigated. I'm going to make your life a living fucking hell. And so, there are consequences to speaking out against, especially people with power.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The victim shaming and blaming, that comes along with that of what does this look like for me? The first thing people start asking is what was she wearing? Where was she? What time was it? Was she alone? It's basically the whole was she asking for it type of thing. And then half the time the abuser just walks away anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and so then what was the point of all of that torture and turmoil on me, the victim,
Right.
when at the end of the day, most statistically more likely, a man is going to be the one to sexually assault someone, but even as a person who I grew up in an interesting area, and the very first time I ever heard that phrase of like, "Well, if you didn't dress so slutty or you didn't," and I was like, "I'm 9."
Right.
How the fuck am I dressing slutty? Like, that's
Exactly.
crazy. As we go kind of into the evidence part of this, we talk about spectral evidence, and that's kind of like when the vibe became law. So the courts accepted what they called as spectral evidence, meaning if someone claimed that your spirit was harmed, that counted as proof.
Wow.
So there and like there's no way to disprove this, right? So people would come in and they would say, that woman's a witch, and I know because she attacked my spirit, and she was like, "I literally, just told you to hurry while while you
Right.
were walking so slowly in front of me."
Yeah.
There is, like, literally no way to disprove this, right? You cannot cross-examine a fucking ghost.
Right.
So, but at the time, it's really interesting because even ministers warned that this was dangerous, and the court said, yeah, sure, probably dangerous, but it's super efficient. And nothing bad has ever happened when efficiency outranks ethics.
Right. Nothing.
So once accusations were like validated, they exploded. So over 200 people were accused. About 80% of those 200 people were women. And some were respected church members, some were fucking children. And some accused
God.
others to save themselves. At this time, say, Z, you're a witch. And I could say, oh, no, I'm not, but Jess is. So you should go talk to her.
Right.
That could be good enough. Salem kind of created a system where accusation became a contagious and silence became suspicious. So if you were not conforming to the society that they wanted, you were suspect number one.
Good
But
luck to the introverts.
yeah, honestly, yeah. I wouldn't be fine in the Salem witch trials because I am very outspoken, but
Yeah.
the extroverted part of me would save me from being sus for sure.
Yeah, it would.
But this is just how fear works when it's institutionalized. It doesn't stay targeted, it spreads, right? So we're not going to just keep it at these, typical like, poor women who are not going to be missed because we got away with that. So we're like kind of moving up the ladder now. Let's start figuring out who else we can blame, who else we can target. The executions and like what they were really for, there were 19 people who were executed by hanging. There's this one man, his name was Gilles Corey, and he was pressed to death with stones for refusing to enter like a plea on this.
Wow.
Yeah. They reported that his final words were more weight, which is so petty,
I love it. I'm living for it.
so cunty.
I'm so here for it.
Yeah. It's not just a flex, like it's a refusal to participate. I'm not gonna give you what you want. I'm not doing this. Like you're obviously out of control and I'm not going to comply in that way.
Kudos. Kudos.
Also, the executions were public. So They were meant to be terrifying. They were meant to restore control. This wasn't justice, this was discipline, and we literally just saw this happen with ICE agents and
Mm.
the way that they have created an issue of just killing people in the streets now.
Nobody's safe. It's not
Nope.
even just immigrants. It's, "You looked at me, so I'm taking you down."
Yeah, this was a white, you know, woman, a Subaru, I think, and it just
All the cars.
she's a lesbian as well, so that's why I assumed a Subaru. But yeah, and we've seen this. We've been seeing this. This has never escaped history. This has been a continuous thing because the thing about like, so I live, in Missouri. And mostly I live in like the Ferguson, like St. Louis Ferguson area, and police brutality has always been a thing, right? But we were able to see an influx of people who cared when news and media started getting a little bit bigger. There's always been people in the streets fighting for um, the freedom of oppression for people of color. This has been a thing that's going on since you know we were able to, and it's been rough, of course, and there's been many lives lost to this fight. Police brutality itself as an entity is something that we were able to get on the media and show people. Cops are fucking shooting people for no reason.
Yeah, it's getting out of hand.
Yeah, and there was a specific one that gets me every time about, an autistic boy of color who was killed, for resisting, essentially. That also goes to show, like, the lack of education when authority is being kind of pushed. There's no education, right? You don't even know the difference between somebody who suffers with a disability, struggling with their disability, and resisting arrest.
Right. It's very clear.
Yeah. I mean, I know, like, my line of work, that's what I'm being taught is to acknowledge the difference and what that looks like, and I have worked in crisis intervention for 6 years. I've been face to face with active shooters. I've been face to face with, people who suffer with disabilities. I've been face to face with people who are, utilizing substances. They're all vastly different. However, for some reason, the police can't see that.
Right, and they're supposed to be the ones trained to de-escalate before they take lethal actions.
Yeah. So this is just kind of like another example of how, in a way, executions are still fucking public. If we're allowing the police and now ICE to get away with shooting people in the streets to show their power, that's a public execution, my guy.
Yep.
As we move on, we talk about how convenient some of these accusations were. Many accusations were aligned with land disputes. So, if someone was convicted, their property could be seized, their family was financially ruined, and old family grudges could disappear into legality. So, Salem wasn't
Oh.
just spiritual, it was economic.
It was vindictive as hell.
Yeah, moral panic has always been a great cover for material gain. And this way, like, we also I want to shed some light on widows specifically because if you were widowed at this time, that was like kind of your only ability to gain estate yourself as a woman. And so think about I'm sure how many of the widows who gained land after their partner's passing were executed for that land specifically.
Yeah.
And then kind of like my favorite little vibe of just women in history is midwifery and also kitchen witches, which at the time went hand in hand, as you can assume. So this part matters because it often gets dismantled as folklore. And kitchen witches and midwives were real. I mean, these were real people at this time who were doing real great work. Were kitchen witches, in my opinion, this is women in STEM, baby. This is science.
Yep.
The women at the time controlled fermentation, so bread, beer, vinegar, preservations, herbal remedies, menstrual regulation, pain relief, childbirth. And the midwives understood when pregnancies naturally failed, when interventions were needed, how bodies worked outside of like male oversight. So this knowledge wasn't written down, it was passed quietly woman to woman. That made it powerful, but it also made it threatening. Because now because you have women who are taking control of something, their body,
Mhm. you don't know if it's still happening or
Okay. Yeah, so it's passed
That's what
down quietly woman to woman, which makes it powerful and threatening. When women are taking control of their bodies and their health, that can seem kind of dangerous to men. I I'm not sure if you've seen anything in the news within the past few years or if that's even still happening. Surely not, right?
Yeah, because women are not losing more and more rights to our own bodies. And, you know, even the doctors that want to help are being overridden by guess who? The judicial system. Oh, it's your pearls. And I guess I better be careful because I'm sitting over here with a jar of herbs soaking in oil for my son who has a wound on his arm to help it heal faster. And these are herbs scientific that are known to help. So, as a kitchen witch myself, I better be careful.
I mean, I've been practicing witchcraft for a bajillion years. And so, like, obviously, I'm not safe. But one of the things that I hold so closely is the science. I mean, there is so much science that goes into what I guess at this time would be considered witchcraft. But I mean, they were using real shit. And nature brings medicine. I'm not pro pseudoscience. I think that's pretty, if you know me, that's very obvious. I'm not pro pseudoscience. I'm not pro like, alternative medication in that way, where, like, snake oil salesman becomes a thing. But, I mean, we found tree bark that saved lots of lives at one point. Nature is definitely giving us what we need, and then women in STEM and kitchens at this time are figuring it all out. So
Right.
when outcomes were good, God got the credit, right? When outcomes were
Of
bad,
course.
women get blamed. And yeah, like we're still seeing that, especially abortion. Like abortion is a thing that we are still like we thought we had it, right? With the Roe v. Wade, that got overturned. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That right got stripped.
Might have heard of it.
Just a little blip.
So, like, we're still fighting for this right for our bodies to be able to tell people, hey, we should have autonomy. And who's making these rules, right? So, like, we're seeing people in a room controlling women's bodies who have probably don't know anything about women's bodies.
Yeah.
A bunch of men making rules for women. Still,
That have no education whatsoever in medicine or biology.
yeah. Find the clip, Mark.
Right.
Um, so humiliation at this time was like a tool. Accused women were stripped and examined for what they call like witches' marks. And this shit was like moles, scars, birthmarks, really anything that could be like, that's a witch. Anything unfamiliar became evidence. So this was never about proof. This was always about dominance. Public shame was part of the punishment. And again, deeply familiar. The trials ended when accusations spread to powerful families.
Of
So
course.
yeah, of course. And this includes the governor's wife at the time. And suddenly, spectral evidence was reconsidered and trials were halted and convictions collapsed. And it's just really funny how all of that works. Salem didn't.
Sorry. And that's still kind of like today, like Andrew, my husband always says, because people claim that there's a cure to cancer, but they're just hiding it from everybody so that pharmaceutical companies can keep profiting. And my husband's take, and I have to say that I agree with him on this one, is if the rich are still dying from it or suffering with it, there's no cure. It's
Absolutely.
still there because
Absolutely.
you can't tell me that the president or the vice president or the rich and famous don't have access to the best of the best.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And this is so true for a lot of things. In my line of work, one of the things that I like to talk about is the opiate crises that we have. It's rampant here, fentanyl specifically. So fentanyl's been an issue since my mom was doing drugs as a young adult. And that was something that was like on the streets, right? That once it started affecting white people, like, my mom was not white. Just she was Middle Eastern. Once it started affecting white people and it started affecting like more of the what you call like richer families, their cocaine started
Higher
getting
class.
yeah, more than higher class. They're like cocaine started getting laced with fentanyl. And now it's a fucking issue. Andrew fucking Versace or sorry, Andrew Cunanan killed Versace. I don't actually know Versace's first name. So Versace, another fucking thing. Andrew Cunanan, gay man, he killed other gay men for a long period of time. It wasn't until this man kills Mr. fucking Versace, they find him day of. He's going through and he's killing gay men in gay clubs, and the police are like, "No, murder," but also
Mhm.
it's only gay men, so whatever.
Giovanni.
Giovanni, of course it is. Of course it's Giovanni Versace. So Giovanni Versace gets murdered by Andrew Cunanan. They find him that day.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
On you can and like laws as well. I think I was just talking to Mike about this recently. I was talking to Michael about it, about how laws are not real for rich people,
No.
right? So
They're
like
more suggestions.
yeah, because ideally you're gonna, have a fine, and I think laws have, like, markers on how that affects people. Rich people can run stop signs,
Yeah.
Rich people can run stop it's fine, you get pulled over, $150 ticket, I don't know. That's how much it is here, I ran stop signs. But,
Allegedly.
allegedly, yeah, you can't I mean, I got a ticket, but, so, like, there's that, okay, I pay that $150 fine, but that law isn't equal to somebody who makes fucking millions of dollars, right?
That's couch change.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's that. Not to get all in that. That's one of my favorite things to talk about, though, is just like what's really going on here. If it's affecting low income communities, people in poverty, we're not going to do women,
Mhm.
minorities, or anything like that. Like we are not going to do a fucking thing about it until it starts hitting those rich communities, those powerful people,
Yep.
men specifically.
The NEM.
But Salem didn't end because it was immoral, right? It ended because it became inconvenient at this point. So, with Salem witch trials, it wasn't hysteria. They were showing us what happens when fear is legalized, when women are controlled instead of heard, and when systems reward blame instead of truth. And if you're listening to this thinking, wow, that sounds uncomfortably modern, that means the lesson didn't die in 1692, even if the people did, right?
Right. It means you're listening
Yeah.
and learning.
Yeah, and, there's, like, that common quote of, like, "History repeats itself,"
Yep.
and history does, and if we're not careful, like, we're gonna see it. A lot of people think that the political climate that we're in is very dystopian, and if you think that, yeah, it is. The current political climate that we're in, where people who are in poverty are losing their abilities to get resources. You're cutting specifically funding for minorities. Like,
Mhm.
you're taking away rights to people's bodies. This isn't happening to men, and I'm convinced this will never happen to men.
Of course not. They will always have full autonomy over their body.
Yeah, for sure, and if men could get abortions, I don't think it would have ever been questioned.
No.
Like, if men were child carriers, like, cisgendered men were carriers, like, they this wouldn't be an issue.
Yes, and thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, of course. It goes to show that we are living in 1692. When we get better, it feels like there's so many people who like, powerful people who come in and get scared of the power that women, minorities, poor people, like, that they're getting. They wanna change it. They want to keep it the status quo. They want people to continue to suffer, and they want people to continue to blame, and if you keep people oppressed and you keep people in poverty, there's always going to be people to blame.
Yep, always.
Before this, we talked about Tylenol and autism. I feel like that really relates to this in a way of instead of looking at the issue that's at large, which is autism is severely underfunded, the autism community is severely underfunded. There's very little research in autism. I currently work in a program that services people with intellectual disabilities. These are people who are more high needs that are on the spectrum and people with Down syndrome. And, we're losing funding for our program. We were just told last week. And this is like the fourth program I've worked with that's losing their funding right now. And So instead of working towards getting more funding for these communities that are suffering in this way, what do we want to do? We want to blame people for the disability.
Yep,
And who better to blame than the people carrying the babies, the people with the uterus? If you're
always.
saying, yeah, if you're saying Tylenol causes autism, you're saying you gave your child autism
Right.
by
And
taking
if you took
Tylenol.
extra strength Tylenol, well, now you have super autism. So you screwed him over on that.
No, I just, before we did like the vaccine thing, right? Where a man, I refute, like, I won't even say his name. You know who he is. A man decided to take 12 kids and say, "Do you have autism? Cool. Are you vaccinated with the specific, like, dual vaccine? Yes, vaccines cause autism, right?"
Yeah,
And he published a study and he pushed it through and he's blaming the parents. He's blaming specifically because, at this time, this is the 90s too. So, like, the moms are making the choices.
right.
Dads are working, moms are making choices for children. And, this creates like widespread mom shaming, mom guilt. And we still see it today. I've
Oh,
gotten
yeah.
in countless amount of arguments with non-vax people who hate my vaccinated children.
Oh, yeah. Same. And I've had somebody that is a friend that I say friend that has basically in a roundabout ways told me that, vaccines caused her, I think it was her nephew, his autism because he was fine. Well, he wasn't fine beforehand. He was just a baby. And then when he was a toddler, he was diagnosed shortly after vaccines. And I vaccinate my children, and my 9-year
Woo.
old is on the spectrum. He is, and I know that this is the outdated way of saying it, so correct me, but he is low support for his needs. Oh,
Yeah.
snap, snap, snap. Look at me
Low, s-
go.
low, Eh, but a
Nah,
support needs would be like somebody who needs more obviously needs more support. Low support needs is people who are lower on the spectrum who maybe suffer still in certain ways, but the higher needs are gonna be your nonverbal, just people who need higher needs, nonverbal, more negative behavioral.
right, right. And I've had people look at him and say, "Well, he doesn't look like he has autism." And I'm like, what does that look like? Because people just assume, that movie Rain Man with what is it? Dustin Hoffman?
I just learned about this movie recently.
You'll have to watch it.
Yeah, Michael
Um,
told me about it and I was like, "I didn't know this movie existed."
yeah. So that one really upsets me because I did not cause my child's autism. Not with Tylenol, not with vaccinations. He was autistic when he was born.
Yeah, he's born this way, baby. And the thing about Wakefield, or well, I said I was going to say his name. I guess I will. The thing about Andrew Wakefield and his study on vaccines is that Mr. Wakefield had his pocket and not dual vaccines. So if somebody's giving these vaccines where instead of giving your kid two sticks, you're only going to give them one, Mr. Wakefield's going to lose money. And that's inevitably how he got his article redacted in the Science Journal. And I mean, he lost his career over it, but just because he lost his career over it doesn't mean that movement that isn't still going on. It is. And what we need to be focusing on is help for these communities. We need to be focusing as somebody in this community myself with two children in this community. There's very little science and I'm working in this community right now for experience with IDD and I see such little help for programs that
Right.
support these individuals, and I think a lot of that is in its own demonizing for these communities.
Right. Absolutely.
But we're always gonna blame women are always gonna be women, minorities, always gonna be those ones getting blamed.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, we're not witches. Well,
I'm a kitchen witch.
yeah, maybe. I mean, is doing witchcraft, does that make me a witch?
Only if you want it to be.
That's fine, I want it to be. I'll be a witch.
I
My little
support it.
sister when she had my nephew, there's a vial of her blood that was left behind and I pocketed it. And she was totally fine. I pocketed it consensually. My sister was fine with it. And I made them into
Good
little
exclaimer.
thank you. I made them into little necklaces, like little blood vial necklaces for me, her partner, and, so now anytime she's like there's a conversation that comes up that she maybe would disagree with me in, she's like, "Listen, I'm not gonna fight with you. You have a vial of my blood and you're a witch." I'm not
Right.
what that looks like.
Right. That was the biggest mistake she could have made, was giving you her blood.
Yeah, this was consensual. She consented to this. She said, "Fine, do it. You can have it. Do whatever you want with it." And then I showed her the little pictures of the necklaces I made, and she's like, "I hate it."
I love that. My gods, I love that.
But yeah, that's the Salem witch trials. It's a historical case study and what happens when fear gets a microphone. Evidence is optional, and women knowing things becomes punishable offense. So if you take anything from this episode, let it be this. If your society starts blaming bread, herbs, or women with opinion, you're in trouble. No witches were harmed in the making of this podcast. The patriarchy, however, remains under investigation.
As they should.
Like, subscribe, whatever. And, have fun. Bye.
Stay safe out there, witches.